You're listening to Up an Octave, a podcast by Sonivia, the podcasting agency that believes that women and non-binary people deserve to take up space in the podcasting industry because our thoughts, voices, and stories matter. Here you'll learn how to make dope podcasts that inspire, educate, convert, and most importantly, make your voice shine. I'm your host, Rue Spence, and I'm here to take podcasting up an octave. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Up an Octave. Today, we are talking about being a podcast guest. So regardless of what your current relationship is with podcasting, if you are someone who has a podcast, or if you're just someone who is prepared to start leveraging your expertise through being a guest on someone else's show, by the end of this episode, you are going to know how to make that happen. So first up is finding opportunities. So if you're listening to this episode, you've probably thought, cool, I would love to be on someone else's show, but I have no idea how to even go about doing that. The first thing is just to identify podcast opportunities that feel in alignment with you and with your brand. For example, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if I went on a podcast that was about being an auto mechanic to talk about podcasting. If I'm trying to grow my podcast agency, that's probably not where it makes a lot of sense for me to be spending my time. Now, if I'm a weekend hobby mechanic and I just want to go on and have the experience, then sure. And maybe at the end, they give me a chance to plug, what else do you do? And I can say, well, cool, I have this podcasting agency. But if the goal of me spending my time on a podcast as a guest is to grow my brand, it doesn't make sense to spend time where the people that I want to work with are not necessarily spending their time. Something else to consider is the size of the podcast that you're guesting on. So if you are trying to really grow your audience or find new clients for your business, it may not be super beneficial to go on a very small podcast with a very small reach. And in a world where time is money, you want to make sure that you are spending your time efficiently. So there are resources like listennotes.com where you can kind of go and see what the global ranking is of a podcast. And I also don't think it's like gauche or whatever to ask when you are having conversations with creators. What are the impressions like? What are the downloads like? What's your open rate if you have a newsletter? I think that those conversations are completely appropriate with a host to make sure that you are a right fit for each other. And part of why I bring up the open rates is because I also think that there's value in someone having a small but really engaged community. There's benefits to both sides. There's benefits to being, this huge but cold community or, a smaller, more engaged community. If you are just trying to play a numbers game and get in front of as many ears as possible, then maybe the biggest show is where it makes sense to spend your time. But if you are going on a show where the, listeners really feel like they trust the host and they believe in the people that the host is introducing them to, that could be even more helpful for your business than just getting a million ears on your message. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but Rue, how do you actually find a podcast? I think that the best place is to start within your own community. See who you're already engaging with on social media, who you maybe even know in real life that already has a podcast, and then hopefully they're within your niche and you can present a pitch to them. Because obviously if you already know somebody, you already have some of that rapport built up, and you can already kind of have an in with them, that's going to be so much easier than starting from the ground up. But let's say that maybe you can't think of anybody off the top of your head. I think that posting on Threads by Instagram is a fantastic way to connect with guests. I am seeing so many new relationships starting on Threads. I really don't think we should be selling it short. I'm also a big fan of the Need a Guest group on Facebook or the podcast collaboration group on Facebook. Those are both really wonderful places to connect. But then if you don't want to do the social media version, there's also websites like podcastguest.com, Matchmaker FM, Podchaser. Those can be good places to find other shows. Some of them do have paid options though, and I don't think that you should have to pay to find a guest connection. I think that those are almost always better when they happen organically. Something else to say is to consider joining podcasting groups in general. I'm a big Facebook group girly, so obviously this is where I'm going to plug Podcasting Up an Octave, which is my group. It's intimate. There are great conversations that happen in there. So that's somewhere that you can spend some of your time. but also like the podcast support community on Facebook. You don't have to have a show of your own to be engaging in those spaces. I would also make sure that, if you are going to be engaging on social media, that this is where you are like suited and booted out there, that you are showing up on social, whatever that looks like for you, whatever makes sense for your brand. That's an avenue that I would make sure is really strong, because when you aren't necessarily showing up and you're trying to pitch people you don't know, it's not super enticing, because the thing of it is like with it being a symbiotic relationship, you want the host to feel like they're getting something out of it as well. And so they want to know that you're going to be reposting their content, that you're going to be sharing with your community, that you are who you say you are, and they want to feel like they're also going to get something out of it. Make sure that you're showing up however that is for you, whatever feels right. If you're a LinkedIn girly, if you're a Facebook person, if Instagram is your sweet spot, like mine is, TikTok, whatever that is for you, make sure you're showing up. And this will also help people vet you, because I have definitely seen some people make connections and it turns out that those are like false promises. So do your due diligence, and they're also going to hopefully do that, research you, check out your socials. And if they find crickets, that's not going to make them feel super enticed to have you on as a guest. And it's also going to make it harder for them to prepare a solid interview for you. So even if they do book you, if they don't know who you are and like what your vibe is, it's going to be a lot harder for them to engage with you in a way that's going to shine you in your best light, which then in turn makes it harder for people to want to connect with you and ultimately buy from you or subscribe to you or whatever you are plugging. You also just have to consider that it's kind of a numbers game. You may make 100 pitches and only connect with 25 people and then only end up on 5 shows. And that's okay as long as you are connecting with people who really resonate with you, who really feel in alignment with what you're trying to do. That's what you should focus on more. So don't be afraid to cast a fairly wide net and then be more selective as you have those conversations to only say yes to what really feels in alignment and what feels good. See what feedback comes back as well as you are pitching. So, even if you're not planning to go on all 100 podcasts, if you are getting the same feedback, it might mean that that's a weak spot in your pitch. So if you're seeing, the same question, that's something that needs to be addressed on your pitch. So let's talk about the pitch itself. Say that you found somebody in the Need a Guest Facebook group and you're like, cool, I really want to be on this show. But when you're actually ready to pitch, there are a couple of different ways to go about it. There's obviously, they're on the Facebook thread. You can just drop a comment and be like, hey, this is me. This is what I do. I'd love to connect. And, can I send you a DM to see if we might be a good fit? But then there's also, you can get a little bit more like on the profesh side of things and create a one sheet. And that's where you can have a headshot, your background, your expertise, your sweet spots, and you can also share some information about your audience. If you're like, I have 20K on Instagram, that's going to be more enticing to a host, that they're going to know that you have a network, that you're primed to want to share their content, but also it again does help to give you a little bit more legitimacy. Regardless of what your audience looks like and your content looks like, I think the biggest thing is just being really clear about what you bring to the table. I see a lot of pitches that are just like narrative, that are just, like, I do this and this is what happened and this is my story and this is how I healed. And it's very valuable information, but that is the episode itself. I prefer to see like bullet points. This is what would be my ideal conversation. This is my backstory. Say it's, someone who healed from trauma. I was in a car accident, bullet. I taught myself how to walk again, bullet. And now I teach other people who are in similar situations. Whatever that is, having those bullets is going to be a lot more impactful for people who don't know you yet. And it also generates that curiosity so that they do want to slide into your DMs and go, okay, I'm really interested in having you on. Tell me more so I can know if this is going to be the right fit. So that's just going to be so much more impactful, so much more readable to someone who doesn't know you if you can just lay it out sort of at a glance. It's more eye-catching, especially if what you're sharing is like a PDF or an image that people can't necessarily scroll through and read that way. So that's something to bear in mind too. And when you have your pitch document, just make it concise. You may have people who say, cool, that sounds great, send me an email, which then gives you a chance to go, almost like a CV or like the resume route. So, you can get a little bit more serious about your tone with that. And so that might be, like, hey, this is my name. These are my credentials. This is what I love to talk about. This is how I can support your show. And then on that email, you can get a little bit more intense. And that might make sense for certain shows, especially if you are like tech person looking to have a really left brain conversation. That might make sense more than someone who just wants to have like a casual conversation about sports or, something that's not quite as intense, maybe not business oriented, but more just like a casual hangout type podcast. With that, the most important thing is just to make sure that your pitch feels like your vibe. Like if you have a very serious pitch, but you're looking to have a more casual conversation, that's not going to resonate. And at worst, like your podcast host is going to feel a little bit catfished. Even though you want to put your best foot forward, make sure that you still feel like you. Your pitch is not somewhere where you should be shy either. Like that is where you should talk yourself up. I see too often these pitches where people almost underscore their accomplishments. Whereas, your podcast host is looking for someone to bring on. They want people who are going to make their audience go, oh, wow, and take that pause so that they listen. So this is not the time to just be like, yeah, I guess, I did these things. No, it's the time to like stand in your power and not sell yourself short or play it small and be like, hey, this is the thing I did. This is what I do. This is my zone of genius. This is how I make magic happen. Be loud about it and share it because that is going to make the interview easier for the host. Podcast hosts are busy. We have a lot on our plates. So the easier that a guest can make the episode, the better. And that can look like you can even name the episode. Be like, hey, I'm happy to talk about this, and give them a template of, these are the talking points. This is what I want to come on and share. Sometimes that is the easiest yes, because it's one of those like, oh my gosh, my kids are at a soccer game all week and da-da-da-da-da. If your host is so busy that they can just find a guest who has essentially helped do the work with them or for them even, and it feels more collaborative, that's a much easier yes than someone that they feel like they're going to have to do all this research and pull all of this information out of. All right, now from the tech side of things, because obviously if you are not planning on actually entering the world of podcasting, but you know that you want to have a little bit more of a presence in the guest capacity, you're probably not going to want to shell out $1,000 for a microphone. And spoiler alert, I don't think that pretty much anyone should shell out $1,000 for a microphone. That is some like high-level Rihanna in the studio stuff. But I would recommend at least investing a little bit, because here's the thing. If you are on someone's show, and especially if they get a lot of guests, and one of those guests has poor audio, that's going to be the episode that doesn't run. Because how your audio sounds is how that person's show sounds. And podcast hosts want to show themselves in the best light. So if you're not able to show up and sound good, that makes them feel like it's not worth their time and leads to your message not getting out there. So my recommendation is to avoid the Blue Yeti, which is a hot take, I know, but I think that at that price point, there are significantly better options. I feel like I see so often people who are just guesting and not operating in a hosting capacity using this microphone, and I feel like it does not do most people any favors. So I'm a big fan of eBay. Yes, it is 2024, and I am still an eBay girly. I actually had someone call me out for that the other day. They're like, wow, eBay. Didn't know that was still a thing. And I'm like, it definitely is still a thing. I am such an eBay fangirl. That's actually where I got the microphone I'm speaking into right now and a couple of my other mics. But you can find great deals there, so don't be afraid to buy secondhand. OfferUp, Mercari, Facebook Marketplace, eBay. Those are all great places to look for a microphone, but just vet, like you would if you're buying anything online, that what this person is selling you is actually something that works. But if you do want to go that route and buy something a little bit nicer, and you think that you're going to be someone who does a lot of interviews, or maybe you're doing interviews until you start your own podcast, I gotta say, I really think it's worth investing in the Shure MV7. They're about $250 new, which is absolutely an investment. But like I said, I found mine on eBay for significantly less. If that's not the option you want to look at, I think you can definitely stick within the $100 range and be awesome. I'm a big fan of the Fifine AM8. That one works super well and it runs about $50. The thing that you're going to want to pay attention to, though, is you're going to want to make sure that you're getting a dynamic microphone, especially if you are not looking to be a podcaster yourself. You are probably not going to want to spend a lot of money on soundproofing your space. So a dynamic microphone as opposed to a condenser microphone just helps you pick up a little bit less of the everythingness of your recording space. So for right now, for example, I am staying with my folks, so I'm not able to record in my usual space. I'm recording kind of in our living room because my baby's playing and eating goldfish beside me. I've got motorcycles going by. I've got a dog jingling around behind me. And I am hoping like heck that my Shure MV7 is helping a girl out because, like I said, it is a dynamic mic. So that's my recommendation on mics. If you're looking to stay as low cost as possible, I would go with the Fifine AM8. If you're looking to write off an expense, that's where I'd go with the Shure MV7. But make sure that regardless of whatever option you take, that you get a mic that has a USB. That's how you're going to want to connect, because if you're not looking to be a full-blown podcaster, you don't need to be messing with XLR. And if your eyes have crossed at this point, the difference is that a USB versus XLR, it's just how they plug in. So a USB mic is going to plug straight into your computer and you're going to be off to the races. Whereas if you go with the XLR route, then you need interfaces and different cables and it becomes a whole production. So if you're just looking to be a guest, plug and play is the way to go for that. And then because I have to go the nerdy audio engineering route for just a minute, something else that's worth considering is when you are showing up as a guest, making sure that you have good podcasting etiquette. So trying your best to show up in a quiet environment. Obviously that can be tough if you're recording from downtown and you've got a lot of train and car and people sounds. You're not going to get the best sound. And your host is going to know that, if they know, oh, I'm interviewing someone in New York, they can kind of expect that. But you can try and make sure that you're not showing up during peak hours of noise. If you can try and not record when your kids have just gotten home from school and the house is noisy, maybe you can record while they're at school, or see if the podcast host has availability on the weekend when they can go hang out with their other parent or grandparent or something. There are obviously going to be times like me right now where you have a less than ideal recording situation, but if you can just do your best to show up a certain way on the microphone, that's going to make your interview better. And again, when the host's show sounds better, that makes them want to promote you, because I have worked with so many clients that I edit for who give me a heads up oh, yeah, this episode doesn't sound so good, so we're just going to release it. Do the best you can, and we'll kind of pretend like it never happened. And that does nothing for you. If your whole point of going on a show is to enhance your brand and, your audio does not sound good, that does you a disservice because you're essentially wasting your time. If they're not proud of the episode that they're putting out with you, they're not going to be promoting it like you hope they would. More on that with the actual content of the episode. During the actual episode, hopefully the host has had some kind of communication with you ahead of time so you can prepare and sort of know what your talking points are going to be. Know the questions that they're going to be asking you so that you can feel prepared. Obviously, you don't want your answers to feel canned, but you don't want to feel super sideswiped by the questions they're asking either. Spend some time preparing. I also think you should listen to the show, sometimes even before you say yes, just to make sure that it truly is in alignment, but also so that you can kind of get a flow for how the show goes. If there's always a speed round, if they play what's in your bag, being able to prepare ahead of time is going to make you a better guest. And again, if you can be a better guest, it's going to make for a better episode. It gets pushed out by the host even more, and you get actually more of your quote unquote ROI for it. Something else with the content is that you have to be ready to show up and be kind of vulnerable. Last week, actually on the show, I talked with Chloe Corcoran, and she talked about the difference of being authentic and being vulnerable. And I'm honestly still thinking about that. But I think having a little bit of a sweet spot between the two of those, obviously you want to show up as yourself, especially if you're coming on to promote something or sell something. You want people to want to spend time with you, but then you also have to be ready to show a little bit of yourself. As you're being interviewed, you want to be able to give your high impact stories. And, sometimes those are going to come from more tough or traumatic places. Just be ready to show up and, give thoughtful answers so that the interview feels productive. And then also on that topic, know what your pitch or plug or sale or whatever is going to be. Hopefully the host is going to ask you and be okay, great. Where can people find you? What's your offer? Something like that. But just be ready to have that kind of elevator pitch so that you can just be great. Thank you so much for this. This has been so fun. People can find me here in May. I'm doing this, sign up now, get on my email list, whatever your sale is going to be. Make sure that you are ready to capitalize on that call to action time. Because, if you just do the interview and it's awesome, people are like, oh, cool, I really want to get to know them. But then you just kind of leave dead space. That also doesn't turn into anything for you. So make sure you know how you're going to sell yourself at the end. And then afterwards, once the episode is live, hopefully the host is sharing it with you. It's like a pet peeve of mine when people have to go chase down the podcast hosts and be like, hey, is it live yet? Like that day, you should be getting an email. You should be getting some kind of correspondence or potentially even assets that you can share to your audience, whether it's, a newsletter, social media posts, whatever that is, an audiogram maybe. The host should be reaching out with, all of that information for you. On you, good podcasting etiquette is to share it with whatever avenues make sense for you. If that's your email list, if that's your Instagram following, spend the next few days just kind of hyping it up and sharing it. And that's going to kind of help to cross-pollinate between you and your audience and the host and their audience. Because ideally, there's going to be this kind of exchange happening where the host is hoping that your audience is going to find them. And obviously, you're going on there to expand your horizons and cast a little bit of a wider net with their listenership. So, really engage with that back and forth. Be friendly with the host. Hopefully you enjoyed them, send like, oh, thank you so much for having me on. Something like that. Just, follow that good etiquette, those manners. And it can possibly even turn into something more. You can potentially even become like a recurring guest. That is, another way to really cement like, oh, I've heard this person before. As they continue to hear you and get familiar with you, then all of a sudden they're the ones reaching out in your inbox. So if that all sounds great, then you should head to the show notes because I have a downloadable freebie for you right there that kind of breaks down your pitch sheet and different places to find opportunities to be a guest. So snag that and start guesting. Psst. Hi. I'm interrupting the show to tell you about something special, a chance for us to connect one-on-one. Whether you're thinking about starting a podcast and aren't quite sure where to begin, or maybe you've got a show already, but you're not sure how to grow, I want to let you know about my free consultations. Yep, that's right. Absolutely free. No strings attached, no pressure, just a chance to chat with your fairy pod mother, that's me, about turning your podcast dreams into reality. You'll walk away from our conversation with actionable steps to take, whether or not we end up working together. Think of it as a gift to you and your show as a thank you for listening to the podcast. If listening to me here isn't enough and you're ready to take the next step, let's chat. Find the link to book in the show notes. Now back to the good stuff. All right, so today's question comes from Cam. I'm in the early stages of planning a music podcast, but I'm stumbling over the hurdle of music licensing. Can you recommend any resources for getting the rights to use music in my episodes? I'm particularly interested in navigating licensing for lesser-known artists from various countries. How can I do this without violating copyright laws? Okay, Cam, this is a big can of worms. So Spotify for podcasters, you used to be able to integrate music into your episodes with them. Spotify for podcasters is currently going through a huge overhaul in ways that are not necessarily actually helping anybody, to the point that I'm like really actually pretty unhappy with how they're functioning at this point. So at this point, you really have to like go through whomever has the licensing, whether it's like a super indie artist who retains the rights to their own music or the record label. Like you have to either buy the rights or get it in writing, please God, in writing, that you can use it. So at this point, using music in episodes is an incredibly uphill battle. So I'm always someone who's like, let's err on the side of caution. And so I wouldn't say that at this point, there's a way to really do that safely. So ways that you can kind of get around this are, leaving a playlist in your show notes. And so people can almost kind of go through that. You're going to want to balance not giving them homework, but giving them enough that makes them then want to go look up those songs. So, you can talk about it. You can even say like, hey, listen to the playlist, then come back and listen to the episode, or you can just talk about it and then be like, to really hear what I'm talking about, listen to the song, especially at like 1 minute and 36 seconds. So that's how I would handle it, is basically everyone has YouTube in their pocket at this point. So encourage the people who are listening to go find it. Talk around the music without actually playing the music. Something else you could do if you're wanting to get, super indie unknown artists is just like slide into their DMs, reach out, see if they want to come on the show, and then you could do like a live performance. I think that would be a lot of fun. Having the artist perform live, especially if they have the rights to their own music, that would be a really fun way to showcase that up and coming talent. I'm a big like CYA over everything kind of person. Please don't do anything that could get you into hot water. I know it's frustrating because of the kind of show that you are wanting to start, but I really do think that if you just have a playlist or like include the YouTube links in your show notes, something like that, I think that that's the way to go. And honestly, what you could do is you could start a Spotify that's just for your podcast, regardless of where you're hosting at, Buzzsprout, Podbean, Spotify, whatever. But you could start a Spotify account and then just create different playlists. You could honestly do this on YouTube too. But just, create different playlists that's like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, so that, as people are listening, they're just able to find that readily. So that's probably how I would handle that. Things change often. So there may be a change in the near future that updates this again. But for right now, that's the route that I would take, just to make sure that you're staying safe and don't get in any legal trouble, or, best of worst case scenario, get your episodes taken down. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope you'll report back when you get your show up and running. If you have a question, you can send it in to me at rue.sonivia@gmail.com, or you can shoot me a DM over on Instagram at Sonivia Studios. I also would love to invite you to join my Facebook group, Podcasting Up an Octave. It's still super intimate, so that is a great place to get free access to me, start some great conversations with other podcasters in a way that doesn't feel gatekeepy and cringy. I will be back next week to talk about using Canva. I love Canva. I use it for everything, and it's a super powerful tool for your podcast, so tune in next week when we're talking about that. Before you go, if you could leave me a rating or a review on whichever podcatcher you are listening on, because just like your show, mine needs those to grow. Thank you so much for being here and helping me take podcasting up an octave.